Have you ever asked yourself, who is your neighbour? Have you ever said, I know I should do and help other people, but who are they? Who should I be helping? Well, point 3 is, who is my neighbour? And this is the answer that Jesus gave him, which you find in Luke 10, starting at verse 29. It says, but he, that's the lawyer, wanting to justify himself, said to Jesus, and who is my neighbour? Then Jesus answered and said, a certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among thieves, who stripped him of his clothing, wounded him, and departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance, a certain priest came down the road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. Likewise a Levite, when he arrived at the place, came and looked and passed by on the other side. But a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. So he went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine, and he set him on his own animal and brought him to an inn and took care of him. And on the next day when he departed, he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper and said to him, take care of him, and whatever more you spend, when I come, I will repay you. So which of these 3 do you think was neighbour to him who fell among the thieves? And the lawyer answered, he who showed mercy on him. Then Jesus said to him, go and do likewise. See, what conclusion did the lawyer arrive at as to who was his neighbour? And how am I to be a neighbour? It was by showing mercy to the one who was in need. And you know, we have a merciful God. He is merciful. He's merciful to us every day. And it is his word that we should be merciful to those who are in need, just as he is merciful. I won't ask you to look it up, but a verse in Micah 6 and verse 8 says, he has shown you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? It is to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. This is what God requires of us. That we do justly, we love mercy, and we walk humbly with God. And Jesus at one time said to the Pharisees, but go and learn what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice, for I did not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance. No, we shouldn't try to tell ourselves that we don't have the time to help someone in need, no matter what their circumstances, because Jesus was always ready to help. Read you a bit out of this book. And this was written by a man called Tim Hansel, and it's called The Good Samaritan. One semester, a seminary professor set up his preaching class in an unusual way. He scheduled his students to preach on the parable of the Good Samaritan, and on the day of the class, he choreographed his experiment so that each student would go one at a time from one classroom to another where he or she would preach a sermon. And the professor gave some students 10 minutes to go from one room to the other, and to others he allowed less time, forcing them to rush in order to meet the schedule. Now each student, one at a time, had to walk down a certain corridor and pass by a certain destitute man who was deliberately planted there, obviously in need of some sort of aid. And the results were surprising and offered a powerful lesson to them. The percentage of those good men and women who stopped to help was extremely low, especially for those who were under the pressure of a shorter time period. The tighter the schedule, the fewer were those who stopped to help the man in need. When the professor revealed his experiment, you can imagine the impact on the class of future spiritual leaders. Rushing to preach a sermon on the Good Samaritan, they had walked past a beggar at the heart of the parable. We must have eyes to see as well as hands to help, or we may never help at all. Now, when Jesus heard that his cousin John the Baptist had been beheaded, we read in Matthew 14 that he departed to a deserted place. He wanted to be by himself. He desired to spend time alone, probably grieving for his cousin. But a great crowd followed, and when Jesus saw them, he was moved with compassion and had mercy on them. He probably didn't feel like dealing with a multitude. He always did what pleased his Father. And we have a God who is merciful, and so in the mercy of God, he had compassion on them and met their needs. Are we being Jesus to those who are in need? Are we moving forward? Because to go forward, we need to be Jesus.